right. So thank you everyone for attending this meeting. As I indicated in the meeting materials, this might be the last meeting we have, but not for sure. We'll have to see how this meeting goes as well. The commission might want the working group to reconvene because they may have questions that they think the working group would be helpful to answer. So we'll see. But I
Am I
could,
muted?
well, you could be muted if you want now. It's fine. But if you don't need to be, Nicole, whatever you prefer. I'll go over some ground rules again. We're gonna go around as we've done in previous meetings, and we'll call everyone in an order. Except the focus is going to be on something a little different than last time. But the ground rules would be to wait for your turn, and then you'll have the floor, and then we'll go around a second time so that you can comment on what anybody else has said before you. The first time that you're called on, if you could say your name, and if you represent an organization, please identify what the organization is. Other than that, while someone else is speaking, it's really important to not interrupt. If you really have something urgent, please raise your hand and someone can recognize you. As was indicated in the meeting materials, the primary purpose of this meeting, because we've gone around now a couple times and talked about people's preferences for substitute terms. What we're trying to do at this meeting is to get rationales for preferences that people have as to certain terms. And we've kind of narrowed it down to the list that I attached in the meeting materials, but the commission is going to want to know more than that. This is not just a popularity contest, and the commission is going to want to hear rationales and want to know why certain terms are favored or disfavored, because it's a pretty significant decision they're going to have to make. There's 191 code sections that use the term either dependent person or dependent adult. So that's a fair number of changes to code sections, and they will probably stay for a while. And that's the primary focus of this whole assignment, is to come up with appropriate substitute terms, although there will be some other things the commission will have to do that relate to statutes. So when we go around, I mean, we already have a sense of how many people from the two previous meetings. We have a sense of how many people prefer which terms. What's really important now, if you want, you can start by saying, I still like this term, or I've thought about it and I really like this term. But then I would really appreciate it, to the extent you have any strong feelings, either in favor of or opposed to any particular term, to please say something. This meeting's being recorded, so we'll have this as a record, and that's going to be helpful. Because you have a perspective, either as a person with a disability or somebody who works with people with disabilities or advocates for people with disabilities. You have perspectives that the commissioners may not have. So that it's really important to hear that from this working group. Before we do that, as I indicated in the materials, before we start going around, again, if someone has a new term that was not in the chart that I sent to the meeting in the meeting materials, that would be great to say it now so we can add it to the list. I don't know that there would be any, and I'm not expecting anybody to have any, but just in case somebody was swayed by what somebody else said, or they had some brilliant inspiration since the last meeting, this would be the time to tell us, hey, I thought of this term. How about this term? If you do, raise a hand. I'm not seeing any hand. Okay. In the meeting material, I had some points at the end that I wanted to make sure no one had any questions about. So I will just ask now. It was the points that were raised were basically, well, you've read them, and so if no one has any questions, that's fine. I did want you to understand that there are these terms, dependent person and dependent adult, are used in code sections where they don't have any clearly applicable definition. And that's something the commission is going to have to deal with, and we're going to have to figure that out. Many of them do have definitions, though. And that leads me to the second point, and this is important for everyone to comment on. The definitions at first glance all look to be relatively similar, except for the APS definition. And I explained why that is. The difference is that most of the other definitions refer to an impairment of some kind with the person's ability to do whatever. Whereas the APS definition talks about an inability. It appears to be a higher standard, and it's possible, even though the legislature, in what it directed the commission to do, wanted this to be done in a consistent and comprehensive manner, the substitution, it's possible that we could recommend a different term for the APS definition. Now, people don't understand what I mean. So I think maybe Jim will be able to help with that regard. But we've been talking about using one term as a replacement term throughout the codes. And one of the things that's been raised in prior meetings is some terms won't work very well in the APS statute because the definition is a different definition. At least there's a somewhat significantly different definition. So if you think that you have an idea for two terms that you think, one for all the definitions, but then this other term for the APS definition, please mention that as well. And so that's, so did anybody have any questions about that? Okay, I'm seeing none. Okay, so does anybody have any question about what I just said about adult protective services definition and why that definition is different than the other definitions? Okay, great. So let's just start now. It would be great if you can pull up the chart that was attached to the meeting materials so that you see the terms. And you can also see I put in rationales both in favor of and against various terms. If you could, and if you have no strong feeling, that's fine, but that's primarily what we're looking for now. So if you could let us know when you're called on why you think a particular term would be really the best term, and also why you think another term would not be good, that would be very helpful. All right, I think we're ready to start going around. So Sarah, if you could start calling the roll, that would be helpful.
Sure, and thank you. And pursuant to Bagley-Keene, we do prefer that your cameras be on if at all possible. And when speaking, if you could please say your name and the organization that you represent, we'd appreciate that. Thank you. And let's start with Adyanka Glover, please.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Adyanka Glover. I work at Disability Rights California in the investigations unit. First, I just want to say thank you to everyone for their continued work on this work group. I was unavailable to attend the August meeting, but I'm glad our organization was still represented. As this work group formed, we began collecting feedback from people who fall within some of the definitions that make up dependent adult in person. We gathered feedback in person and virtually, as well as through conversations, as well as a survey that went out to, again, people who fall within the definition. Through the survey, which garnered 38 responses, and through conversations in various spaces, the most favored substituted term was supported person, supported adult. Through conversations, people expressed dislike for some of the wordier phrases that I had shared from this work group. At DRC, we advance person first language, and we recognize that the most popular substituted term is not first person language, but we firmly believe that people who meet the definition should determine what the replacement language should be. We are also open to some of the proposed modifiers like potential, or actual supported, to better reflect and capture the independence and autonomy of people with disabilities. We understand that this support group is not the ultimate decider. Um, However, we hope that our contributions and recommendations help advance a term that better aligns with existing definitions and is informed by people with disabilities. I'm more than willing to answer any questions about the survey or how we collected feedback, but just want to reiterate supported person, supported adult was the most favored term through speaking with people.
Let's see, are there any questions? Okay.
So supported person or supported adult, I just want to make sure I got it.
Yeah.
Okay, thanks.
Yinka, I have a question. Did you discuss the people first dichotomy with the choice that most people had?
Yes. So not in the survey. The survey was more straightforward with the questions, but in the conversation, when people started expressing in the group that they liked the term supported, I asked, well, how about the term person with support needs? And there was a general, I would say, like dislike or not favored to that phrasing. They liked the more straightforward, and I don't want to put words in their mouth, but they liked the term supported person above person with support needs. And again, at least in that kind of group communal sharing of people's
Right.
thoughts.
But so do you think it was in part because it was sort of a clunkier term that was longer, maybe? Because they don't mean exactly the same thing. A person who is supported is a little different than a person who has a support need. The need might not be met for one thing. So that would make them not supported. I don't know if was that explored at all or.
What I would say is what I would assess from the feedback is the longer terms, so the wordier terms or more words within the phrase. It was less favored, or there was like a general shaking of the head of not liking the term. So I think kind of the more succinct the term is,
Right.
or replacement for dependent is definitely what is preferred.
And were these people generally people with disabilities that you were surveying?
Yes. So two key groups that I spoke with were people with intellectual and developmental disabilities, and then also specifically the statewide self-advocacy network. Those were two spaces that I went to.
Okay.
For example, like a day program and spoke with
Okay.
their group.
Okay, thanks. I won't ask this many questions, but I'm really interested because this was a whole new group of people. Last question, I think. Do you have a sense that the preference was largely, in other words, if the question was, how would you like to be referred to generally, as opposed to what a code section how a code section might refer to you? Do you think that was part of it? Like people didn't want to be identified as, oh, you are a person with a support need. Like that's just too many words, that it would be easier to have a shorter phrase. Or were they talking about this particular, what we're doing here? In other words, how we're putting a label in a code section as opposed to necessarily addressing somebody directly?
I think it was a little bit of both. So in how I phrased it in the group, I asked, how they would want to be identified, but also really framed it like we're not changing any definitions in the law. It still says that you are independent, um, or who could live independently. Um, what would you like the term itself dependent to be changed to? So I do think it was framed in both ways,
Okay.
and supported adult in person was still elevated.
Excellent. Thank you. Thank you very much. Okay. Sarah? Oh, wait, we have a hand. It looks like we have two hands.
There you go, Nicole.
Jessica. Jessica, I see your hand.
Okay, yes, thank you. Yes, I was going to ask what population of people with disabilities Disability Rights California reached out to. And she did answer my question, which was primarily people with intellectual and developmental disabilities and people in day centers. In my perfect world, I wish Disability Rights California had reached out to a broader section of people with disabilities, especially people with mental health disabilities,
State Council, you have
disabilities experiencing homelessness, people with invisible disabilities. But one thing I've learned since the last meeting is that the intellectual and developmental disability community has been really thriving with the term support needs as a respectful and encouraging way of communicating and identifying. And I think that's absolutely beautiful from an advocacy and a messaging standpoint and working with individuals with those disabilities. But I would like our group to consider that that is only one I mean, I don't know how to say this, but it's not the largest group of people with disabilities. And even though
you
it
on the
works,
State Council.
even though it
Are
works,
you on mute?
even though it works really well within that particular community, and I support it completely, I still just want to emphasize that there are so many other types of disabilities that we need to honor in this meeting. Thank you.
Jessica, while you're away, since I appreciate that, and that was helpful, but you might as well just go ahead, and if you have any other terms that you either strongly support and you want to give the reason for it, or the rationale for opposing any other term. That was helpful in terms of the rationale for opposing the terms that you just talked about.
Okay, yes, I'm happy to go. I guess it makes sense. So thank you. Thank you for
briefly, if you could, though, because
yes,
we only have an hour.
briefly. I did read all of the statutes that were provided to us. It was a very lengthy read. And one thing that is clearly identified is, except for the APS definition, the person has some type of functional limitation. I don't find functional limitation to be offensive. In order to be represented by any of these laws, you have to have a functional limitation. So I don't find that off-putting or offensive. And it by far encompasses, a majority of the definition, much stronger than person with a support need. So my vote is still for functional limitation as it matches the definitions most closely.
Okay, and one last thing I'll ask you, and I want everybody to address this as well. I didn't mention this before. We've talked about some modifiers, such as actual or potential, and also specified is another modifier. And also there's a question of whether, if it's something, a person with something, whether it's support need or functional limitation, whether it should be plural or singular. These are all legitimate questions, I think. So do you have any strong feelings about any of those? Using a modifier or singular?
Yeah. My feelings as somebody that works and trains with law enforcement on being very inclusive about including people in the protections provided by these laws, I think there is a need for simplicity because there is a cultural misunderstanding within law enforcement that dependent adult means that you have a caregiver or under a conservatorship. And even though we do want law enforcement to be trained and to read definitions, in reality, they don't have room left for training. They're not going to get much more training, and we need to break this cultural misconception to have more people included. So I am for simpler language. So the simpler we can get, the better. And I can't see a reason for a modifier, but if somebody were to show me one, I would be open to that.
Okay, and I'm guessing singular then also, rather than plural, or maybe you haven't even thought about that.
All right, can you explain that? I just
adult with functional limitations, plural, or with a functional limitation.
Do we have I think it should be A, because I don't think you should have to have more than one. I don't think that's consistent with the law.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, everybody.
Sure. Sarah, can we call on Nicole next? Because she has her hand up anyway. No, we'll have lots of.
Certainly. Oh, yeah, feel free. Nicole?
Hi, Nicole.
Hi, I'm hearing everything that you're saying, and most of this, like I'm on the state council on developmental disabilities, and I hear all of this network of people, and we are just a person, we're just human, and these words should, whatever you do in this meeting, doesn't matter what phrase, we are a person first, a human first. It doesn't matter. No derogatory words. No putting like different different like indigenous or putting a name on it. Don't put labels on us.
Okay.
It's not okay.
Right. Thank you. That's very helpful. Right.
Thank
Any other thoughts about any of the terms that the specific terms that we've been looking at? Like,
the one that I said in the other meeting, the support.
thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, Sarah, I'll leave it to you whether to call on hands or what, because I don't want everybody to start raising their hands, but that's fine if we can't really tell. So
Well, it's up to you. Would you like me to call
sure.
people with hands
Okay.
first? Okay.
Yes.
The individual with the no barriers.
Hi, it's Ruthie. And yeah, that's actually part of my e-dress. And my consulting firm is No Barriers Disabled Access Consulting and Advocacy Services, and I'm with Californians for Disability Rights. My comment goes back to Jessica, functional limitation, not a functional limitation, functional limitation. You don't have to make it plural. You don't have to use any other insertions, pronouns, adverbs or verbs, but functional limitation. That is something that I would support, and also possibly simply requiring AFN, access functional need. And AFN is becoming more well-known, and hopefully law enforcement understands what that is. And we now know that in emergency services, they're getting the hang of this AFN, access functional need. So those are my two comments. So functional limitation without any other descriptive or insertion, or functional limitation requiring AFN. Thank you.
Okay, well, a question, so maybe
Yeah.
everyone else will address. Any thoughts about the Adult Protective Services having using a different term than whatever term we use for the other code sections?
I think that could create bureaucratic misinformation,
Okay.
disinformation. APS has got to align with all of this. It just does, because especially since APS does have the law enforcement component to what it does, and that's in and of itself, as Jessica said, already it's not chaotic, but it's not clear. So APS has got to align, and if they want to weigh in.
Okay, I appreciate that, because Jim,
Yeah.
I was going to call Jim out of order here.
Yeah, and I'm going to lower my hand.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Jim, can you address this? I mean, you would probably be you would be a good one to ask about this question.
Yeah, let me see if I can explain it kind of succinctly. And so one thing I would say, kind of also in addition, Steve, is that I think we should be thinking about this definition also applies to criminal charges as well. So to think of the code section we're talking about actually is not just encompassing APS, but others that are using the dependent adult term. There are other programs within that definition, or other other entities using that term as defined there. So that is like another user group that may have opinions on this being changed. So
Right.
that's what
The thing I was focusing on was the definition. Is that I mean, maybe there's not an intention to differ there, but to me,
there is.
inability is
Yeah.
different from impairment. A person who has an impairment doesn't have an inability necessarily, whereas the APS definition seems to include like
Right. So I think the APS definition adds a level of an additional requirement, I think is the way to think about this. And so I think it would use whatever term for the other programs that we decide on. I think we would use that. And then there's and that person has an inability to protect. So it's not that whatever definition we come up with for the rest of them, it's that plus a situational component that is required through that code that's specific to abuse. And so I think the way I would utilize this is whatever term this group comes up with and recommends, that would be the starting place. And then we would need that carve out and that special definition because there's an additional requirement there that's not present in all of the other code definitions, as I understand it, that there is in the abuse context. So I hope that's helpful for folks.
That is helpful, I think. Well, as long as you're on the floor, any pros and cons about any of the terms?
Yeah, I would just advocate for how you wrote it up, Steve. And again, my rationale for the legislature and the why the abuse world needs a separate definition is because of those additional requirements and acknowledging it's not legally equivalent. But I would absolutely support the base definition being, the recommendation from this group plus
Right. Now I'm saying that the various terms people have favored or disfavored. People with a support need, people with functional limitation, people, and then modifiers. Any term that you really want to argue for or against?
Not particularly. I think for the abuse, I would say for the abuse world, let's say, as I'll call it, or for APS, as people are saying, I would vote for at risk or endangered, but that is because it is not equivalent to defining the person with a disability. Okay, again, I can't emphasize that enough. Yeah.
Thank you. Okay. Sarah?
Adam Willoughby.
Hi, Adam.
Hi. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Adam Willoughby. I'm with the California Department of Aging. Just appreciate being part of this work group and appreciate the rich and nuanced dialogue. I think, ultimately the Department of Aging is going to be supportive of whatever the will of the group is going to be. I don't think that we necessarily feel super strongly about any of the terms that are listed on the matrix, though I will say, I think where we're gravitating towards is a person or adult with a functional limitation. And the reason I say that is when people ask, what do you do? Who do you serve? Our sort of, our quick elevator speech is we serve older adults and people with disabilities. And so when I look at that statement and I substitute our current language, people with disabilities, with some of these other terms, such as, person with a supported need or supported person or person with support accommodation needed, those are less intuitive to me in a quick, 10-second explanation of what we do, as opposed to a person with a functional limitation. There is an element of intuitiveness that comes across very quickly. I think people grasp what that means, a person with a functional limitation. So I think for those reasons, we would gravitate towards supporting that term. I think it's simple, it's intuitive. But again, ultimately, we're going to be supportive of whatever the recommendation of the group is.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it. Okay, Sarah.
Carmen Ruiz Ochoa.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Carmen Ruiz Ochoa. I am with the Department of Developmental Services as part of the Autism Services branch. Really appreciate being here. And given the information consistent with person's first language, I think that that is going to be the most important aspect that resonates. So continuing with person first language and person with support needs to continuing to identify the broader definition.
Okay. And I'll ask the plural singular question to you. And someone raised the point that there's a third possibility, but do you have a strong preference for person with support needs versus a support need, or just person with support need? Need being a term that doesn't require, it's not plural or singular, it's just a description.
Correct.
Do you have a preference for one of those
No.
three? Okay. Thank you.
Okay, Claudia Center.
Hi, my preference, this is Claudia Center. I'm legal director at DREDF, Disability Rights Education and Defense Fund. My preference is for person with a support need. The reason being that under our laws, anyone with a functional impairment, or sorry, let me start over. Under our laws, anyone with a disability essentially by definition has a functional impairment. That's how we define disability. So this is someone with a disability with a need on top of whatever functional impairment they need. They have a support need. So that's why I prefer a person with a support need.
Okay, thank you. And aside from that, any negatives, any reasons that I understand what you've said about functional limitation, and that's great. I just wanted to make sure there was nothing else that you had a strong feeling about. Those seem to be the two terms, aside from the people first issue that Yinka had pointed out, where the group she talked to said that they like supported person. But aside from the people first thing, which I think is a pretty strong driving force here, I'm not sure that we're going to be able to accommodate the other choice. It seems like we're ending up close to two choices, either person with the support need or person with functional limitation, plural singular, maybe with modifiers in there. But any other term though that you want to talk against or say that this would be a bad idea for whatever reason?
I think that our practice at DREDF is to sort of alternate between person first and identity first, and to recognize both. My concern with supported person, I think you stated, which is the person might not be supported if they haven't yet gotten what they need. So that was just my sort of accuracy reaction to that.
Okay, thank you very much. Sarah.
Okay, Greg DeGier.
Hi, this is Greg DeGier with the ARC of California. First, I wanted to thank the commission staff for all the work on this. This has been the most complicated piece of legislation I've ever worked on. When we originally proposed the bill, I had no idea that there would be 191 sections scattered all over the code with seven different definitions. You've done a great job. Thank you. We're always generally in favor of people first language. My feeling is functional limitations is probably the best, because it for two reasons. One is it more closely reflects the actual definition, not for APS, but for everything else. So it's less likely to mislead lawyers, judges, police officers, social workers, people with disabilities, ourselves, anybody, than any other term. The other is that saying person with support needs is too narrow. It does not cover everybody who's covered under the definitions. It in my book, as a person with a disability myself, it's in the same category in general as dependent adult or dependent person. That it, I'm not dependent, and I have no support needs, but I do have functional limitations, and I don't want to be left out. And people who have that kind of disability should not be left out, I believe. The argument that they should be shorter, I think, has convinced me. I was the one, I think, who originally suggested specified functional limitations, and I do think that's too wordy and is the cops and everybody is going to screw it up. And so I think functional limitations would be best. Thought about maybe even leaving out the word functional and saying limitations, but I think maybe it's clearer to say functional limitations. I think that as some of the material you sent out, I think mentioned that in every case in which the term, whatever term we come up with, is used, the code section ought to say, as defined in section so and so, to refer everybody over to what the actual section says, because that's not going to change. That's exactly the same as it's going to be now, and that's my. If we were able to change the definitions, I would have I think all of us would have some suggestions that the definitions aren't the best, but we're stuck with them. So we need a term that reflects the definitions as much as we can, and I think that is functional limitations, and also that is as respectful as it can be. And I think functional limitations is more respectful than with support needs, because some of us don't have support needs. We need accommodations, but we don't need support needs. And let me see if there was anything else I wanted to mention. Just to summarize that, I think the argument for persons with or adults with a support need, I'm sorry, as with a functional limitation, singular, or leave out make it neither singular nor plural, but certainly not plural, because some people have a functional limitation but not two. That's best both to be clearest in terms of what responding to, representing what the section says, and also most respectful.
Okay. Thank you, Greg. Sarah?
Catherine Perez.
Oh, yes. Hi, everyone. This is Catherine. Can you hear me?
Yes. I mean, it's not crucial, but if you could put your video on, it would help. I don't know if you're able to. It's fine if you.
Yes. I'm so sorry. I'm not able to.
Okay, no problem.
My apologies to everyone about the video. Hi, everyone. I'm Catherine. And I am the director of the Coelho Center. My apologies for missing the last meeting as well. Apologies all around. I think I bring another different perspective because I don't work with direct services. I work at a university and I do policy, academia, and research. Yeah, I mean, not to get too academic and to keep this as brief as possible. As much as we want to think about, moving toward disability justice and disability rights perspective. I know a lot of you are on the ground and doing the day-to-day and working within the system, but the disability rights, the disability justice community we try to move away from medical model of disability, which I know many of you know, which is, thinking that the problem of disability is inherent to the individual with the disability. And so when I see definitions like functional impairment, and I realize this is just language, but I think language is, part of the problem of ableism, right? And ableism is defined as, oppression of people with disabilities, right? Language upholds the system of this oppression, right? So what we're doing here is really important. It's critical, right? So I understand functional impairment. It's a legal term. It's part of what we use within our systems, but I feel like we have a really big opportunity here to move towards something like support need or support accommodation need, to shift our language to say, hey, it's about accommodating an individual and not something that's inherently flawed with them, but it's about, the systems that are not responsive to the individual and that need to accommodate these individuals, that are not built for the systems, that are not built for people with disabilities, right? And this language, that continually talks about people's as less than, as impaired, as ill, as, et cetera, stigmatizes, provides, continues with these negative attitudes and assumptions, rather than calls on these systems to think about how we need to support, how we need to accommodate, how we need to change, right? And I understand that it's a little bit more onerous on the systems to think about how we have to do this. But I think this is part of the process of how we change, right?
Right.
Sorry, I think I've taken up too much time.
Okay, I just to summarize, I mean, it's an interesting concept that you're raising. It sounds to me like what you're suggesting is that even if person with support need doesn't perfectly match the definition and we can't change the definition, that there's sort of a statement that can be made by using a term which is kind of more progressive and perhaps less disrespectful or demeaning, and the term would be defined anyway, so it's going to mean what the definition says, but the term itself has some value.
Yes.
Is that okay? All right. Thank you very much. Okay, Sarah. Oh, wait, I see Nicole has a hand up.
Nicole?
Hi, Nicole. If you could be kind of brief, that would be great. Oh, hi.
Hi, sorry. I agree with what Catherine has said.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
All right, Sarah.
Nina Spiegelman?
I'm Nina Spiegelman with Disability Voices United, and I will be brief. I absolutely have to say, Steve, I don't know how you keep putting all this together and just making it very digestible, but definitely thank you for all that. And, as usual, everybody makes such really great and interesting points, but I still am going with where I've been before, and that's person with a support need. I think Claudia, Carmen, Nicole, Catherine got, really covered the bases on all of that. And I'm there with that, we don't have to go over it, but that's where I'm at.
Thank you. Okay, Sarah.
Okay, Regina Marie? Regina?
Hey, give me a second. I think my video is now on.
There we go. Good job.
Okay. Sorry, I was eating lunch, so I kept it off. And thank you for waiting to call on me because I'm done now. I represent the California Council of the Blind. And when we discussed this, we did discuss functional needs, functional limitation. And I think we're running into the same idea that sitting here in my house right now, being totally blind doesn't mean that I'm limited. I'm only limited because I don't have accessible documents, for instance. So reading Braille is I could say sighted people are functionally limited because most of them can't read it, right? So I think I may need support at certain points down the road. The same with someone that is deaf. A lot of time the sensory disabilities get underrepresented and we're not heard as often or considered as often in the disability community because we're smaller and for other reasons. But for deaf people, the support is the interpretation. There's nothing functionally going on with them. They have a usable language that is good for them and all of that. It's the same principle. So we did favor person first language. The Council of the Blind uses this all the time and we're committed to it. So we do still like person with a support need or person with support needs, if it deemed, we're not as stuck on the plural or singular, although I agree, you only need one support thing. And I would favor potential because as has been pointed out, it might not be met or it might not be needed right then and there. So people that are saying, I don't need support. I'm sitting in my home. I'm good. Everything's set up for me. And that's true, but it's potential. So if someone comes to my door with some print documents they want me to sign, I'm going to have a support need. I can't just do that. I hope that's clear. And I think there was one other thing I wanted to say, but it might have been leaving my mind. I'll raise my hand if it comes to my mind. But that's where we stand. Oh, we did talk to quite a few members of our community. I did one-on-one interviews, plus we had an email that went out, and I got responses from that.
Thank you.
Steve, could I ask you a question? I don't know how to
You don't know how to raise your hand.
I don't know how to raise my hand on my phone.
All right, one-time exception.
What you mentioned that I'm interested in your thought that limitation, using the word limitation, is more limiting than support need.
Yes.
Are you asking me if I said that or someone else said that?
I think he's talking to me, yes.
Yes, I am. Is there some, which is the opposite of the way I was looking at it,
Yes.
that limitation is more broad. Is there some other term? Well, two questions. One is there some other term that's broader? I mean, as I said, I'm concerned about support needs, since I and some other people with disabilities don't have any support needs.
Right. That's why I said potential. I do favor the potential for that very reason. But if you say functional limitation, that puts me into a category that I don't belong in, I feel, and a lot of people who are blind, low vision, or as far as deaf and hard of hearing coming across this too. I function just fine. I'm not limited. It may feel limiting to you that I don't have sight, but for me, this is normal and this is my life and I'm good at it. I'm very good at being blind. I'm very good at functioning in the world. However, I do have some needs and they're for accommodation because the world is not set up for me. So if everything was in Braille or large print, if everything had tactile warnings and that kind of thing, we wouldn't have to have these discussions, but that's not the real world. It was set up the way it's set up, and that limits me, but not because of me, the person. So I'm a person with potential support needs. As I'm sitting here right now, I don't have any need. I'm able to operate Zoom. I'm able to do all of this, but it's potential. I could have one.
Okay. Thank you, Regina. And so I want to offer something here to everyone, because maybe this will be of some help. So, we're sort of circling around a little bit, and I think that's great. And there's not going to be a clear answer to this. I think I'm pretty sure of that. So we're trying to do, excuse me, the best we can. So 2 comments that are, I suppose, are negatives about 2 different terms that have been suggested here. So with regard to functional limitation, Regina, I understand what you're saying, but I'm looking through the definitions as you were speaking. And the definitions, almost all of them say that dependent adult or person, regardless of whether the person lives independently, has physical or mental limitations, which restrict their ability to do certain things. So you arguably could be saying that you wouldn't even qualify if you say you have no functional limitation, because the definition actually appears to require some type of limitation. Most of the definitions do. Now,
no, I'm going to sound like a lawyer, but my limitation is real. I'm talking about the root of my limitation being the world around me and how it's constructed, and not necessarily because I'm lacking something. And that's why I like better the people with the potential support needs. Yeah, that's it exactly. Because, and I do think it would encompass more people, because I think people don't needing support. For instance, someone with a mental illness is not functionally having they're functionally okay, right? But the mental illness causes them to need support, and they can walk and talk and do all of that.
I understand.
Right? So I think it potentially encompasses more people.
Yes, I'm not arguing for any term in particular. I just want to point that out to everyone. There doesn't have to be a perfect match between the term that is ultimately used and the definition, because it's likely the commission will agree to in some way connect the term to the definition. In other words, the term will be used, followed likely by a phrase that says something like as defined in section such and such, or there'll be some other way to do that. So the term could be anything at all, because if it says as defined here, then that's what it means. It's what's the definition. But there still is a sense of the word. This is something that I think Catherine was using. She was talking about that the word itself has some meaning, even if the definition is somewhat off. And so I don't know how you resolve this. Is something that the commission will have to think about.
But I do agree with Catherine. I actually agree with her that if we don't start making some, I believe language matters. And so my degree's in sociology, so I'm going to stick to these systems arguments, because that's what I believe influences people.
Thank you. One other comment, just for everybody's help, if this is of some help. We had a comment at the last meeting that was disfavoring person with support needs, because the comment was, we all have support needs. We could all use some kind of support. And if you add the word, I don't know what people's feeling is about that, but if you add the word potential, and if you say person with a potential support need, that seems like that could be virtually everyone, right? I mean, who doesn't have a potential support need? Even if you have, like, you had some illness and you don't know how bad it's going to be, you might in the future, you might have a support need, or you something happened to you, broke your arm, and you don't know whether it's going to heal right. And so that's something to think about also. Potential support need would be very broad. Again, it's going to be defined, and the definition would limit it. So maybe fine, but something to think about with potential, using the word potential in there. Okay. I think we're ready for possibly for one of the two Tonys, because I think those are the last two people who haven't talked yet.
Claudia did have her hand up. Did you want to?
I can skip. I need to get off in a couple minutes, but I just wanted to say to Greg, it's appropriate that you might not be covered if you don't need the support that the statute provides. So we're not trying to cover everybody with a disability. We're trying to cover the people who have the need described in the statute. So to me, it's appropriate that even though, most of us on this meeting have disabilities, we might not qualify. I think that's okay.
That's an interesting point. The legislature's assignment to us started out by saying people with disabilities are being disrespected by the use of the term dependent person or dependent adult. And the focus seemed to be on we need to come up with a term that better than dependent person for people with disabilities. But your point may be correct that a person with a disability doesn't necessarily qualify as a dependent adult or person if they have a disability that does not cause them any limitation at present in terms of what they do. So also
in terms of protecting their rights,
right.
It's a specific kind of limitation.
Right. Okay. Sarah.
Did you want to, Jessica Kramer, or did you want to move to one of the?
Yeah, I really need to respond to that because there is only one definition that even resembles stating a support need or an additional criteria, which is the APS definition. Every other definition does not have an additional criteria and does not in any way require a support need. So I have no idea where that assertion is legally based in, that somebody like Greg would not qualify as a dependent adult because he might not have a support need. There is absolutely nothing that justifies that in 99% of the definitions. And I think it's really important because I think we have a misunderstanding in this group about the fact that there is an additional need for support. But based on the legislature and the definition, that is actually incorrect. And there are district attorney's office rewriting blueprints. The police officer standard and training is rewriting their trainings to law enforcement. And we are not using the APS definition here. That is almost a separate topic. Even the Cal Crim Code uses the 18 to 64 regardless of lives independently definition. So when we're talking about prosecuting abuse, we are not having an additional support need. There is not an additional criteria. I think this is really important. That's all I got. Thanks.
So Jessica, you're very strongly advocating for functional limitation. Is that correct?
I'm okay for accommodation if it's a compromise, but support need is something that's been added here by the misperception that a dependent adult needs support. That's part of why we're here. We're here because we want a more respectful term, and we're also here because the terms are currently not working for the population, and the legislature, even in the Senate Bill 338 Senior and Disability Justice Act, which mandates a law enforcement policy change as of 2021, they state in the history and the intention that people with disabilities are misunderstood as having a higher criteria of dependency. It is not accurate. The legislature does not want us moving in that direction. And by using support need, we are literally co-signing an antiquated, misleading perception based on what the legislature wants and what the definitions state. So the CalPrim code is not using the APS definition, which has the additional criteria. only APS uses that definition. And I don't think here we're talking about APS. So person with an accommodation could work as a middle ground. But person with a support need is only continuing to mislead the people that we need to most understand this.
And you are, just for people who weren't at the last meeting, possibly, Jessica, a major concern of yours is law enforcement. And
yeah, I
not understanding what, or misunderstanding what a person with a support need is, and
yes,
jumping to a conclusion that this is not applicable to
yeah, I mean, I know that we really have to go, and I'm trying to be so respectful of time, but I started my nonprofit in 2014, Reach San Diego Senior and Disability Advocacy, because I was absolutely a dependent adult. I was being abused by a predator, and law enforcement was laughing in my face when I tried to say that I'm protected under these laws. They wanted everything to be a he said, she said, and they laughed at me. And I began to study the terminology, and I'm now a, Department of Justice, Attorney General, and law enforcement subject matter expert. And we have made great strides in the inclusivity. But right now, law enforcement is still confused because they work with APS, and the term dependent implies conservatorship, guardianship, or like full-time caregiving. Law enforcement does not understand the actual definitions, and the actual definitions don't say anything about conservatorship, caregiving, or support needs. And we have to understand law enforcement is limited in their training and their understanding. And the legislature, please, you guys, read Senate Bill 338, Senior and Disability Justice Act, to understand where the legislature is going. That's why we're saying senior and disability victimization is the name of the new law enforcement policy. It's not even elder and dependent adult abuse. It's senior and disability victimization.
Thank you very much, Jessica. Really appreciate the comments. Okay, Sarah.
Tony Chicotel, please. Tony Chicotel? Or Tony Anderson, if you are.
Yeah, this is Tony. Sorry.
Okay.
Tony Chicotel, Senior Staff Attorney for California Advocates for Nursing Home Reform.
Tony, if you're able to turn on your video, that would be great.
Yeah. Sorry, I can't do that.
That's fine. Okay.
Yeah. Sorry. I think my most important comment is that we think every one of the terms in that list are all an improvement, and we would be happy to see any of them move forward in place of the current terms. We have a slight preference for a person or an adult with a support need, and it's certainly not a passionate favoring this one over any others, but I think it's the slight preference. We feel like in our experience that would be the most easily understood term by the public. Anytime I hear functional limitation, this is our perspective. We're very involved in long-term care facility, the law and the world of that. And when I hear functional limitation, I think about formal assessments and people wanting a demonstration of that limitation as opposed to an explanation. And when I hear support need, I just think people would be more prone to accepting an explanation rather than, prove it kind of thing. That's just our maybe unique perspective. Also think that potential would be an enhancement, but the trade-off is it becomes more wordy. And I think the priority should be to keep it as simple as possible, and also think that it should be singular.
Singular as in a support need, or singular as in just person with support need?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think a support need is our preference. Support need is probably more accurate, but I think would be a little more difficult for people to understand, the average person to understand.
Okay, thank you very much, Tony.
Tony Anderson?
Yeah, hi. Am I also, maybe I have a question too. Is the APS reference in the notes, does that mean, are we needing to come up with some other proposal there, or some other comments to the committee then, or
Well,
that laid out there for us to sort of think about?
So it was something that was put out there for people to think about.
Okay.
You know, the term is the same right now, and the legislature said, come up with a new term and be consistent and comprehensive in the replacement. So I don't know whether the commission or the legislature will go for, well, we actually can't be consistent because we need a different term for that you used to use the same term for adult protective services. But it's possible. And so that I threw it out there to see if people had some ideas. Now, Jim works in that department, and his suggestion was use the same term, but then have an add-on for adult protective services. I don't know exactly how we would make that work, but possibly we could come up with some way to do it. He's suggesting that would be a way to keep the term consistent, sort of an identifier, but then say there's this additional qualification in the APS world. Anyway,
Wow.
so that's a brief answer here.
Just to make it more complicated, huh? Well, we were looking at the three that we really like, the support needs and the functional limitation, sort of leaning there. Although this conversation kind of helped me, because the part about how you may not be, it might not be relevant or pertinent to the issue. Your disability may not be pertinent. You may not have a disability to that degree. So I wondered about, would there be any way of, so when we're saying potential support needs, or even potential functional limitation, would there be a use for something that sort of narrows it down to the event? We just had a lot of this conversation with a bill. We ran this or supported this year. Claudia is no longer here, but we worked together on this issue quite a bit this year about it's not an automatic that the person is not able to, in that case, was consent to sex, but in this case, their disability might not be relevant to the statute. So if we said it was pertinent to the function is pertinent, or the support need is pertinent, relevant. I don't know, does that help or not? But I just in that conversation, I thought that made a lot of sense to me. So in terms of a vote, I think I did like the functional the most, although it does harken back to functional assessments. Those are things that we still do, so I'm not even sure of the statute on those. So I don't know. It's not very definitive on my end. It's just either way, the support needs or the functional limitations.
Okay. Well, that's fine.
I support those too.
Thank you. It's helpful. Bobby, I'm sorry if I skipped you before, maybe, but I see you now. So Bobby, why don't you go ahead?
All right, this is Bobby Dutta, and I'm with Statewide Disability Advisory Council. I have an inherent bias towards functional limitation. The reason I say this, my experience dealing with a lot of state worker needing accommodation, or under any kind of a public service, if you're asking for accommodation, one of the questions that come up, you have to justify the functional limitation, why you need the accommodation that you're seeking. So given that it's so widely used term within the area of disability, person needing that service, they are generally familiar with what they have to say and do to get that accommodation. So rather than reinventing the wheel, my bias is towards using functional limitation just to make it add more clarity to the issues that we're discussing. It's not creating a new definition, but something that's already we can build on, that's so widely used within the government services and in public service arena. So that's my 2 cents.
Okay, two questions for you. One, a functional limitation without the S, or functional limitations plural?
I don't have any preference. I mean, either way, if you just get the functional limitation done, I think the polarity of your conditions and all of that, it doesn't really matter much. You can simply say functional limitation, or just simply say functional limitation should be suffice in getting what you're trying to get done.
Okay. So I think we've been around. I think everybody's had one shot here, and we still have a little bit of time. I want to sort of summarize a little bit and maybe go around again, and maybe people can address this or address anything else but it'll have to be very brief, because unless people can stay, that's fine. It seems like I'm hearing a number of people talk about functional limitation as being a more practical term that works well for law enforcement. It's been used before. People know what it means. It's consistent with the definition. And the main negative is that it is somewhat stigmatizing in some sense. It's not as much as dependent person, but it's not moving that far away from that. Whereas support need, which seems to be the other choice, is kind of a more of a progressive term, maybe more. I don't want to categorize it any more than that, but it's, Catherine had talked about how the term itself has meaning, and we're sort of elevating it beyond old thoughts about limitations. Now, the limitation could be real, but I'm wondering if there's a way to come up with a term that sort of blends two concepts in some way, perhaps. And particularly limitation seems like something that is that might be problematic, although maybe that's realistic because that's what's in the definition. But if we're just talking about the term, if anybody has any ideas of somehow a way to combine those two sentiments, something that is practical, but at the same time is sort of more uplifting, just more, presenting the people described in a better light. So think about that, and then we can just go around again. But it's 1:15, so the meeting's supposed to end at 1:30. If people can stay, that's great. Otherwise, just like a minute or less. So Sarah, could you just start calling on people again? Go around.
It looks like Regina has her hand up.
Hi, Regina.
Hi. So precisely the word functional limitations goes back to those functional needs assessments. And a lot of us have had them. And for people that are low vision or hard of hearing, many times those aren't good memories. For me, I have prosthetic eyes, I sail through those, but they do not. And it's a lot of questions about what you can and can't do that are very invasive. And so I think that might be the reaction. I don't want to speak for everybody, but for myself, remembering those functional needs assessments are part of my objection.
Okay.
Precisely because you have to prove something, and where people with vision loss and hearing loss run into a problem is it's like they might have limitation in the dark but not in the light, or in the light but not in the dark. And this idea of how much you can see and how much you can't see it becomes very painful to discuss for them, especially if it's a progressive vision loss, because it changes.
Okay, thank you, Regina. Adinka.
Hello, I want to affirm what Catherine had mentioned, just the heart of her comments, as well as like the intention behind them, and where we can go with what term that we choose. So yeah, that's where my comment lies. Definitely support that.
Okay, thank you. Nicole.
Yes, this is her mother, Deborah, and I'm her support person. And Nicole needs support right now because she is overwhelmed with this conversation, and she wanted me to reiterate for everybody on this committee that the purpose in all of this is to change language so that it is not as offensive as it currently is. So we need to stay focused on that. By doing that, as Catherine said, language is so important. And for Nicole, she has advocated for years about people first language. And I think that is the heart and the core of this whole meeting is people first language. And as Catherine said, we need to be moving forward with that type of language. And we can start by this particular work group choosing words that are people first. And Nicole feels supported. She does not feel like she has a functional limitation. And I think that's very derogatory. So that is from Nicole, from her support person that she needs currently. Thank you.
Thank you very much. All right, Sarah, you got to take control now and just call on people again.
Okay, Adam Willoughby, any comments?
I don't think so. I think the Department of Aging is going to be very deferential here. I think I'll just reiterate what I said earlier. There is an element of simplicity and being intuitive to me with the term a person with a functional limitation. Going back to how we describe the services that we provide services and supports to older adults and people with disabilities. If we were to substitute people with disabilities with a functional limitation, in my very limited sort of narrow mind, that makes sense to me. But again, we are happy to support whatever the will of this group is and appreciate all the different perspectives that others have voiced.
Thank you. Why don't we say people who have additional comment, raise your hand now, and then we'll just call on the people who raise their hands. Greg, okay, that's fine. We'll call on Greg. So go ahead, Greg.
I think that the big question that we're all trying to address is what the purpose of this changes, and there are two purposes, and how do we balance them? One is to come up with a term that reflects the definition, so that the cops and everybody else will hopefully read the law and follow it. The other is to come up with a term that's respectful, and I had thought that, well, I still think that for some of us, functional limitation is more respectful, but I see other people feel that's disrespectful, and needs is more respectful. Maybe if the term functional limitation is disrespectful, maybe we shorten it. We have the word functional, just say limitations. It's the other option, and I'm not advocating this, is to come up with a meaningless term that doesn't offend anybody because it doesn't mean anything, and just say anyone with a banana, a person with a banana is covered by this, and then banana as defined in section so and so. That would be this would not be the first time the legislature has dodged a problem like that, and I'm not advocating it, but that's ultimately, if we want to avoid both of the problems we're talking about, that's what we should do.
Okay, thank you very much, Greg. Jim.
Thanks, Steve. Just one other option I was thinking in terms of the APS context. I think the way you spoke about it is one way. Another way is that there are two terms, and when the two-part test is there, we just use that singular term, like at-risk adult. But then when we're defining things, and we're using dependent adult in the way the group's using it, that we use that term. So that's just a way to make it less clunky, more straightforward, that it differentiates between those two. To your point, that does mean two things when the legislature asks for one, but using that term when it's appropriate as the single term, and then having the second term when it's appropriate, meaning that essentially they are two different things.
Right. Okay, thank you. I'm seeing no hands. Are people, Catherine? Oh, I meant the feature on the Zoom, but that's okay. Catherine.
This is Catherine. I, um, I, I mean, I'm hearing just Jessica's, I think is her name, Jessica's points, and I, I don't have Jessica's knowledge or experience, but, I mean, I would love to learn more from Jessica and her experience, and I hear it, and, you know, I want to do more research to understand, and I know we don't have the benefit of time, unfortunately, but I mean, something she said made me think that maybe if there's room to put on the table, maybe person with accommodation needs, or I know one of the options was, and I know it's a little more clunkier, but support accommodation needs. Um, I like that alternative as well. If as Jessica is saying that the support needs doesn't reflect all of the situations, I wouldn't want to end up in a situation where it's not reflective for all the situations. If accommodation needs is more reflective of all the situations, then maybe that is the better alternative.
I mean, okay, thanks. I mean, it occurs to me we could have a really clunky term, which would be a functional support need. There are different kinds of support, and so one type would be functional support. And you know, I don't know. It would be a lot of words, but maybe that sort of blends the two things. It seems like the respectful notion is getting rid of the word limitation. That seems to be the problem with functional limitation. I think I've heard that a few times. That support is better than limitation. Anyway, I'll throw that out for anybody else who has thoughts. Regina, I see.
I'm sorry, I'm not where I can unmute. I can get the video. I thought that I was done, but I will say that the accommodation could be a good middle ground for me as well.
Thank you. Tony, you have your hand up.
I'd like that functional support needs. It just kind of felt like it was getting us closer. You know, I look at the support needs and functional limitations. They're basically the same things. Just one's negative, saying you have these limitations, and the other one is pointing out that you need some help. But my other question, maybe somebody could help me, is that if you have an accommodation, you're granted the accommodation, does the law not apply to you?
Does the law not apply? I'm not sure I'm understanding your.
Are you not qualified under the category? You're not. If it's you need an accommodation and you are granted the accommodation, then therefore are you not eligible for whatever the protections is under a particular statute?
Yeah, I mean, I imagine it's possible that you could have an accommodation. Maybe other people here obviously know more about this than me, but I would imagine you could be granted an accommodation, which does not necessarily meet the definition here, because it's not an ADL, but maybe I don't know about that. Okay, Jessica. Still muted. Gotta unmute.
Yes, thank you. So I'm going to keep my video off just because I'm in between doctor's appointments. So my apologies for that. But
you are okay, good.
Thank you. So that last point was really interesting, and I think we could say the same for support need. What if somebody was denied a support need? Would they still then qualify? So the concept of being approved or denied, I think, is very interesting. And then the other thing I wanted to say is, do we have the option to share contact information? Because I have also wanted to connect with people to learn more and haven't been sure how to do that.
Sure. You mean it's people that we could contact?
No, meaning like if we want to reach out to each other and share information that we might not have on our own, do we have a way to reach out to each other?
So we'll talk that over. I don't, this is a little bit unusual for the commission to do a working group like this. And so, you probably noticed that everybody was BCC'd in the emails, but I don't know. I can't answer that question right now. We can talk about that and get back to everybody.
Yeah, this is Sharon. I'm the executive director. I think it's something that we can talk about and what the parameters are. And we before we shared anyone's information, of course, we would want to get their consent.
Yeah, I recognize there could be some issues with I know we're not Brown Act, but same similar concept of, basically too many people. But I do have some understanding that there already have been people in this group that have been meeting who are connected otherwise. So I would be okay with whatever you guys decide.
Okay, thank you. Does anybody know the answer to the question that was asked about, does an accommodation necessarily, if you have an accommodation, do you necessarily qualify under the definitions other than the APS definition? I'm sure you don't necessarily qualify under the APS definition just because you have some accommodation. But does anybody know whether that's sufficient to qualify under any of the other definitions?
Greg, I think it's clear that it's unclear. But if that's the
okay,
right. If the need is more to have a respectful term that everybody agrees is respectful, rather than having an accurate term, then that would be the way to do it.
Right. Okay.
The one area, sorry, this is Jessica. The one area where I think that could pose a challenge is essentially we've written a best practice for law enforcement on how to identify if the person they're and also prosecutors, how to identify if the person they're interacting with qualifies for protection under PC 368, Penal Code 368. And some of that questioning is, do you have accommodations? Are you able to meet all of your activities of daily living and then give examples? Do you have any challenges in walking, talking, filling out forms, completing tasks? So I could see a person being asked by law enforcement, do you have any accommodation needs? I could see the disability community potentially, especially people experiencing homeless who might not even know they qualify, or people with mental health conditions. I could see people very quickly saying, no, I don't have accommodation needs, just because they haven't been introduced to the concept that they're entitled to them. Yeah. So in that way, I think it could be counterproductive, but it certainly meets the less offensive. Even though I clearly am offended by support needs, I think I'm the, one of the lessers who's expressed that. But I don't. So yes, to answer your question, I think people with accommodations would be entitled because they have a functional limitation. That's what's required to have an accommodation. But I'm not sure accommodation would help with inclusivity.
Just a time check. It is a little after 1:30 now.
Right. So yeah, people can go. Jessica, functional support need, does that do anything for you?
It's better than support need, but I'd have to contemplate it and probably run it by my law enforcement partners. So it doesn't immediately sound bad, but I'm not 100% sure. I think putting the word functional in there certainly makes it more of the same language that law enforcement is accustomed to when it comes to protecting people with disabilities. But I'm not sure how it's going to play out. I would need to get back to you.
Right. Okay. So I don't want to cause anybody to want to stay beyond unless somebody has something else that they want to offer. Thank you very much for your participation. I'm not seeing any hands, so I'm assuming that's the case. Again, thank you very, very much. And I don't think we're there yet, but we might be to the place where commission staff goes to the commission and reports what we have so far, and then sees what the commission has to say. And so please continue to watch your emails, because there's definitely a chance that we'll need to sort of convene or reconvene the group to answer specific questions that the commission might have. This is not easy for sure, but there's been lots of insightful comments, and they're very, very much appreciated. And if anyone has any questions or more thoughts, feel free to email me at any time. And if you want to comment directly to the commission, you can do so by either sending an email to us, to staff, and we'll pass it on to the commission, or you can attend the commission meeting, which the next meeting is December 4th, and you can attend by teleconference. And public comment is taken after each item that's presented. So after I present whatever is presented on this particular topic, this study, then the commission will ask if there's any public comment, and you could offer what you like. So until then, thank you all very much. Any last questions anybody has? Okay. Thank you. Really appreciate it, everyone. Thank you very, very much. Have a good week. Bye-bye.